Mercedes just triggered an FIA investigation by hiding something inside their 2026 engine that no one was supposed to find. How do you build an engine that passes every regulation and still get caught with illegal data the FIA wasn't even looking for? What you're about to discover could explain a secret performance advantage that might win Mercedes the title or get them banned before the season starts. And if you think this is just another tech controversy, wait until you hear what's really buried inside the data logs. When the FIA flagged Mercedes engine data for further investigation, it wasn't because the numbers were high, it was because they didn't make sense. Dyno simulations coming from Brackley reportedly showed power outputs that violated no written rules but raised internal alarms. How can an engine meet every static limit, every fuel flow cap, every combustion guideline yet still produce more torque, more thermal efficiency, and more deployment longevity than what's theoretically possible under the 2026 regulations? That was the mystery. And deep inside the telemetry, the FIA started seeing patterns they couldn't explain. Not illegal in form but suspicious in function. At the center of the controversy is a subtle manipulation of thermal dynamics, something even seasoned engineers struggle to quantify. Mercedes' internal combustion engine is allegedly built using a range of cutting-edge alloys designed to alter their expansion behavior under extreme heat. At ambient conditions, the engine passes every FIA compression test. But when race temperatures climb, those materials expand in precisely engineered ways, shrinking the combustion chamber volume just enough to raise the actual compression ratio, unlocking hidden power. This isn't cheating in the traditional sense. It's weaponized physics. And that's what has the FIA concerned. Because no current regulation accounts for how engine parts behave at 120 degrees Celsius under full load. And here's where things get more complicated. The FIA's current inspection tools are based on cold measurements. That's not a loophole, it's a legacy limitation. Formula One simply doesn't have standardized systems in place to measure compression ratios at operating temperature. Mercedes knows this. They've built a power unit designed to operate legally in one environment and advantageously in another. It's the motorsport equivalent of a chameleon, one engine, two identities. And that duality is exactly why rival teams are now furious. Ferrari, Honda, Audi, they've all invested millions into power units that play by the visible rules. Mercedes, it seems, has invested in what happens when no one's watching. The political fallout has already started. Multiple manufacturers have filed formal requests for clarification, which in Formula One language is code for, "We want this banned immediately." These are not light accusations. They're not about fair play, they're about regulatory integrity. If the FIA allows Mercedes to exploit a condition they don't have the tools to police, what does that say to every other team? To the fans? That smart engineering wins or that blind spots in governance can be monetized? That's the narrative being shaped right now, not by race results, but by backroom technical reports and silent meetings between engineers and stewards. Meanwhile, Mercedes remains silent. They haven't admitted to the technique. They haven't denied it either. But insiders say the entire engine architecture is built around this principle. The cooling layout, the combustion timing, even the energy recovery profile, all of it is integrated around this heat-activated compression advantage. If the FIA bans it, Mercedes doesn't just lose a few tenths, they lose the very core of their power unit. That's the risk. And with engine homologation deadlines fast approaching, the clock isn't just ticking. It's detonating. This also puts George Russell and Kimi Antonelli in an impossible position. These two drivers are expected to lead Mercedes into a post-Hamilton era with performance and professionalism. But if their car becomes the center of a rules war, everything they achieve on track comes under suspicion. A pole position isn't just a victory, it becomes an accusation. A dominant race win isn't just a performance, it's a controversy. That kind of pressure doesn't just affect results. It affects confidence, strategy, driver mentality. In this environment, every lap is political. And now the fans are watching closely. After years of dominant cycles from Red Bull to Mercedes and back, there's an appetite for fairness, for true competition. And if the season starts with Mercedes pulling ahead thanks to a technique no one else can use, the backlash will be instant. Twitter will explode. Headlines will spread. And the FIA will be forced to make a public ruling not just on legality, but on the spirit of the 2026 rules. The question now is no longer just about engine data. It's about credibility. And whether the most successful team of the last decade has once again built a masterpiece or walked the razor's edge of regulation too finely. The FIA now faces a brutal strategic choice, and every path comes with massive consequences. If they act quickly, issuing a technical directive to redefine how compression is measured under operating heat, they risk being accused of moving the goalposts. It would be a public admission that the rulebook failed to anticipate real-world engineering advances, and that would send shockwaves through every manufacturer already locked into their 2026 engine plans. It would also validate Mercedes' technical brilliance, but at a devastating cost, forcing them to rebuild part of their engine architecture from the ground up just weeks before homologation. That's not just interference, that's sabotage. And the optics would be catastrophic for the FIA's already fragile image as a neutral regulator. On the other hand, if the FIA chooses to observe for a few races while letting Mercedes compete with their current design, they run a different kind of risk. Because if Mercedes dominates from race 1, with visible performance superiority and statistical consistency that no one else can touch, the entire grid will erupt. Protests will be filed. Meetings will be held behind closed doors. And the FIA will be accused of negligence, of allowing a performance loophole to fester into a regulatory failure. At that point, any rule change will feel like damage control, not leadership. And if fans begin to believe that 2026 is just a repeat of 2014's one-team dominance, viewership will drop and trust will plummet. This isn't just a technical challenge, it's a credibility crisis. The FIA must decide whether to protect the integrity of the rules as they were written, or to protect the competitive balance of the sport as it's perceived. Because Formula One is not just engineering. It's theater. And in theater, perception is reality. If Mercedes wins with this engine, regardless of legality, the public narrative becomes one of manipulation, of legal trickery, of the system being gamed by those with the resources to exploit ambiguity. And that narrative, once seeded, doesn't go away. It becomes part of how the season is remembered, archived, and debated for years. Let's not forget, we've seen this kind of slow-motion collapse before. In 2019, Ferrari was investigated for irregularities in its fuel flow system. The data was suspicious, the telemetry didn't add up, and while the FIA never publicly accused them of wrongdoing, they issued a private settlement. The result? Ferrari's performance collapsed in 2020, their reputation took a hit, and to this day, fans and rival teams question the legitimacy of their 2019 wins. The lesson was clear: silence isn't neutral, it's destructive. If the FIA repeats that pattern now with Mercedes, they won't just damage one team. They'll damage the fabric of trust in the championship as a whole. And then there's the psychological dimension. Teams like Ferrari, Red Bull, and Audi have already mentally prepared for a hard-fought title fight under the new rules. But if they realize they're 3/10 down before the first qualifying session, the entire competitive atmosphere changes. Frustration builds. Aggression follows. You'll see riskier strategies, early season crashes, even driver errors born from pressure and desperation. F1 isn't just about car performance, it's about belief. And when belief in fairness collapses, teams stop racing with clarity. They start racing with emotion. That's when accidents happen. That's when tempers boil over. Behind the scenes, this situation is already fracturing alliances. Technical directors from rival teams are demanding emergency meetings with the FIA. Legal advisors are preparing position papers. Internal engine departments are reassessing their thermal designs to see if they can replicate the trick or if they've already locked themselves into an obsolete layout. The ripple effect has begun. What Mercedes uncovered is more than a loophole, it's a blueprint. And now everyone else is scrambling to catch up, or bring it down. But the real unknown isn't technical or political, it's narrative. What story will this season tell? Will it be the tale of a brilliant engine exploited in silence, then revealed as the secret to a championship run? Or will it be remembered as the year Mercedes overstepped, got caught, and watched their entire season unravel before the lights even went out in Bahrain? The answer to that question depends not on the stopwatch but on the FIA's willingness to act before it's too late. As pre-season testing approaches, the FIA knows they are running out of time. Every day without a clear ruling deepens the uncertainty across the paddock. Teams are already finalizing engine integration, locking in cooling layouts, fuel mapping, and chassis coordination, all of which depend on combustion architecture that cannot be re-engineered overnight. If a directive drops after testing begins, it won't just penalize Mercedes. It could cripple multiple suppliers, manufacturers, and technical partners across the grid. The chaos wouldn't stay in the engine room, it would bleed into logistics, driver preparation, sponsor relations, and even fan expectations. In short, a delayed decision could sabotage the credibility of the entire 2026 launch. And if Mercedes is forced to alter the engine mid-season? That's an engineering nightmare. The entire PU was designed around a single principle: extracting hidden compression through heat-induced expansion. Remove that element, and the entire chain of systems collapses. Efficiency drops. Integration misaligns. Thermal stress management becomes unpredictable. There's no simple fix when your advantage is built into the material science. It's not like tweaking wing angle or swapping suspension arms. This is the internal skeleton of the engine. If it goes, Mercedes' season goes with it. And that risk of collapsing from the inside out makes this investigation more dangerous than any penalty or protest. On the other hand, if the FIA allows it to stand, even passively, the message is just as clear: interpret the rules better than your rivals, and you win. That's not necessarily a bad thing. Some will argue that this is exactly what Formula One is meant to reward. Brilliant engineering, clever solutions, deep technical risk. And they're not wrong. The greatest innovations in F1 history, from double diffusers to blown exhausts, were born from bold interpretation. But there's a difference between bold interpretation and regulatory blind spots. Between genius and imbalance. And the danger now is that if Mercedes isn't stopped, it's not because they beat the field, it's because they raced in a zone no one else had access to. This is also a reputational gamble for Mercedes. If they win races early on, the suspicion won't go away. Every qualifying lap, every fastest sector, every win will be seen through a lens of doubt. The headlines won't say, "Russell leads." They'll say, "Is it the engine?" That kind of narrative pressure is toxic. It poisons confidence. It distracts from progress. And it casts a shadow even over legitimate performance. Mercedes wants to return to dominance. But dominance born from controversy is not legacy, it's litigation. It's scrutiny. And it's a scar that lasts longer than the trophies. Meanwhile, George Russell and Kimi Antonelli face a unique burden. Russell, already under pressure to prove himself as team leader in a post-Hamilton era, now has to anchor a campaign that might implode around him. And Antonelli, the young rookie with all eyes on him, could be forced into a championship soaked in politics, not just pace. This isn't the debut season he dreamed of. This is a furnace of regulation, pressure, and expectation. Their performances, good or bad, will be judged through a distorted lens. That's not just unfair. It's destabilizing. And for a team that prides itself on precision and control, chaos like this is the last thing they can afford. And finally, the fans. Formula One's global audience has grown massively in recent years, but with that growth comes demand for clarity, transparency, and trust. If 2026 begins with an unresolved scandal, with Mercedes pulling away while rivals scramble to adapt, the backlash won't be subtle. It'll be vocal, sustained, and global. The sport can't afford another season where one technical interpretation warps the entire grid. That's not competition, it's an arms race with one winner and 9 losers. And fans know the difference. They can tell when they're watching excellence, and when they're watching exploitation. So here's where everything lands. Mercedes built an engine that may be the most sophisticated interpretation of thermal dynamics we've seen in decades. The FIA didn't see it coming. The rivals can't match it in time. And now the sport faces a binary moment: either act fast to level the field, or let the loophole define the year. So what do you believe should happen? Should the FIA intervene now and risk rewriting the title race? Or stand back and reward the team that simply outsmarted the system? Because whether this ends in dominance, disaster, or disqualification, one thing's clear: this story is only just beginning.